Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another IronEdge Group webisode. I will be your. I mean, maybe I should be like in more like a Vincent Price like voice or something, but like I feel like I should like at the beginning of Thriller, right? Like, but it's our spooky Halloween themed appropriate Ghostbusters. So I've been waiting for the new Ghostbusters movie. The whole reason I wanted to not get sick during the pandemic so I could finally watch the new movie because I'm a fan of the original. And part two is pretty good. The one with the more recent one I watched, and it was pretty terrible. I'll be honest with you. It was not great. Not for any other reason other than it wasn't really well written. It just wasn't great. It had potential, I think. But anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity today, and we're going to talk about some of the similarities of the movie Ghostbusters and cybersecurity, which I think is really important to help create some analogy to what this looks like, because cybersecurity is hard and it's sometimes difficult for people to wrap their head around and understanding risk and whatnot. So we want to kind of walk through a little bit of that today. What was that? What?
Say what?
Well, I was about to introduce you, so hold up.
Hi.
Hold on there, Chifu.
Hello.
All right. So here's who's going to be helping us today. There's me. I'm Andrew Moore. I'm the COO here. And then we've got Dan Mallard. Dan, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Dan Mallard.
Fair enough. And then there's Patrick Myase.
Hello, I'm Patrick Myase.
Fair enough.
You
might remember Patrick from such Instagram stories as "This is my dinner" and "This was my breakfast."
Yeah, that was a hit, man.
They were good.
It was a viral hit.
Likes. That's no joke.
Oh, God, I threw in some Simpsons there. I give y'all some Troy McClure.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yep. Dan, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to paint the picture of how we got to the point where we're talking about 80s movies or 90s movies. We love them both. And how we're tying those into IT topics. So Andrew and I in particular, and Patrick as well, but Andrew and I in particular really love 90s movies. We really love 80s movies. We both did theater in college and we like to talk about it, right? So as we think about these podinars or webcast episodes, we try to think of a theme and something that would be entertaining and fun for us to talk about more than anything else. And months ago, we were batting around ideas and we were talking about doing a podcast on ranking 90s movies, something like that. We thought that was a lot of fun. We talked about it for a while. And then we talked about, could we tie a movie theme into an IT theme? Because that's even better, right? So a few months ago, we put a episode together where we tied Jurassic Park into how to secure your IT systems, right? It's really, really fun episode to watch, but that was the first one we did within this sort of overall theme. And that sort of takes us up to today when we're doing really the second one in this line of thinking where we're comparing IT current events or IT things to consider back to 80s, 90s movies. So that's how we got to where we are today.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for providing. No, you've got to. It's important for us to try to find ways to. I find that in consulting, it's always important to try to help create some sort of an analogous, story or path for people to follow, right? And so I heard somebody say something interesting the other day. I was reading the Michael Lewis book, the new one about the pandemic. And he had said that analogies are shortcuts to understanding, right? Specifically when it comes to difficult things to explain. So what we're trying to do is create some analogies here for people to go, oh, okay, now I understand that more effectively, because sometimes it can be a little weird. But ghosts, ghosts are weird in and of themselves, right? Like I don't know that, what people believe in, what they don't. I think it's an important thing to kind of jump into here. So what we want to talk about is that in business, when it comes to technology, you're dealing with a lot of different external factors, right? And some of them are very easy to understand. They're very simple threats, right? Your competitors, price, cost, those types of things. there are some things that I think a lot of folks believe maybe don't exist. Maybe they treat them with a certain amount of healthy skepticism. And I feel like a lot of that comes back to, specifically in business, technology risk, and cybersecurity is one of those technology risks. So sometimes we'll see organizations that have created what we call IT debt, where they're like, look, I bought this server 13 years ago. It runs. I have files on it. I don't understand what my problem is, right? I don't understand my risk. And then you have others that are, and that's a little more of a concrete risk because you're talking about aged systems. You've got a little less concrete risk, which are these external forces that you never see, but you hear about, right? Like people hear about these risks. They're like, well, I know a friend of mine who got hacked, or I read this thing in the newspaper, right? People are like, pictures are never happened, right? And so, when we talk about, do you believe in ghosts? Like, do you? Like, what do you believe in when it comes to the risk within your organization? Dan,
it's interesting because organizations that are smaller or younger, as far as the total life of that the organization has been in place, haven't maybe had time to see the ghosts, either because they haven't been around long enough, or they're just sort of not big enough to get that quite a bit of experience, right? And so what I mean by this, and what we're saying is, what we're comparing here is IT threats, like known IT cyber threats. We're comparing those to ghosts. For example, you look at something like ransomware. I work with companies that have been around for a year, have been around for much, much longer amount of time. I work with very small companies. I work with very large companies. What we tend to see is that smaller companies, just because they have a smaller footprint, they have less employees, they may not believe that they could get ransomware. I see the same thing with a newer company that's been around for a few years. They just don't have as much IT experience. They don't necessarily believe that cyber attacks are a real thing that's going to affect them, right? Just because they haven't seen it, and that's fair. But we come in as consultants, and our team comes in, and we've seen these type of things happen to similar size companies and similar, they're in similar businesses and things like that. So what one of our jobs is as consultants is to come in and say, these ghosts exist. These are real. We can say, without a doubt, these things are real. These things can happen to your business, right? And so that's kind of something that I see that over time, as businesses are open for many more years, then they've had an attack, they've had this and the other, and then they start to believe in those ghosts, right? Patrick, do you see the same thing?
Yeah, and to the point is oftentimes what we see is that a lot of companies will say, well, why would they go after me? Why would they target me?
Dude, right. Why would a ghost haunt me?
It's a 15-person shot. I got nothing to haunt you. It's right. The fact is the threat out there, they don't care. Like, typically speaking, a lot of these threat actors will just have tools that scan the internet, right? They'll scan IP addresses, looking for vulnerabilities. It's all automation at this point. And so they're looking for, weak points in your network, whether that's a firewall or, a server or something like that. And that's an easy way to get into their environment, right? That's an easy way to if you take the analogy, to haunt your business, right?
And they do. They do. Like, that's the interesting thing, right? Like, you find that what they say is that most of the time, if somebody's infiltrated your network, they will lurk around in your network quietly, and you will never know that they're there for months. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so if you haven't had a breach or a virus, or heck, even spam or phishing, which I seriously doubt. I think everybody in this day and age has had some experience with that. Mm-hmm. So it's not a question of if, it's really a question of when, right? And to what degree, to what damage will a breach happen to your organization?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of people think that, like, to use the analogy, like, we showed the picture of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, like a network hack isn't always going to be this destructive, 400-foot tall marshmallow beast, like, stomping around in your environment and destroying your stuff. Right? It might just be, a slovenly ghost that, you don't really realize they're there, and it's because you're not seeing the signs, right? They're just kind of lurking around, and eventually they're going to come after you and do something, but it may not be like imminently destructive. It just might be incredibly inconvenient for you as an organization, right? And so I think it's important to remember that people need to be prepared, right? That this sort of threat exists, and not to, ignore it as folklore or something that only happens to big organizations. Like, I'm not built on an Indian burial ground. Like, there's no reason for ghosts to haunt me, right? Like that's poltergeist stuff, right? Like, no, like this sort of thing can't happen to anyone, right? It doesn't matter what the history of your organization. It doesn't matter the size of your organization. What matters is that you are essentially prepared, that that as Patrick said, it's not if, it's when, and that you've got some risk mitigation steps in place.
Yeah. And also to kind of, to keep that theme going, right? If you have just a nuisance, like say, take spam, for example, or phishing, it's a nuisance, right? It's always coming into your inbox. You're always dealing with it. It's not something, it may be noise that you tend to forget about. But if you ignore it long enough, it's going to get, it may get worse, right? The ghost may get more emboldened to do nastier things in your environment, right? So if you have a benign virus that's just sitting around there, it can get worse, right? It can spread. It can inject further down the road, a ransomware to encrypt all your data, right? So it's important that even if you have a benign infection or a benign threat in your environment, that you just don't ignore it. It's important that you protect yourself and you continue to be vigilant about what's going on in your environment.
Yeah. Do you have the spider sense? So a lot of times employees will receive an email or they'll see something happening, and most of the time people would say, that seems a little fishy. Something's not right, which goes to Patrick's point. Yeah, you could ignore that. You kind of go on about your day, right? You clicked on something, your screen turned black for a second. Doesn't quite seem right. You go on about your day. Nothing seems to happen. You didn't lose internet connectivity. You're kind of doing your thing. Well, to ignore those things, back to Patrick's point, you can't ignore those things. You have to be able to bring them up. You have to have the spider sense to raise your hand and say, something just doesn't look right. And your employees have to be able to do that too.
Yeah. And I mean, and so we've got some things that we're going to talk about here in just a second regarding like creating the lookup tools for paranormal activity, right? And I think it's important to remember that, like, especially in the movie Ghostbusters, right, there was a lot of like talk about this sort of thing, and then the ghosts started to show up, and the Ghostbusters had to like create all of these tools, right, in order to fight this new threat. And so, we'll talk about what that looks like here in just a second, because it's really the same way in the technology industry, is that there was a group of people that existed, right, back in the day, that were really kind of niche, and they were only seen as the kind of people that dealt with these really incredibly difficult threats and whatnot. And they had this very specialized set of tools, and they were like highly scientific and whatnot. And small businesses and folks in our industry only would utilize those tools or those people in the event of some sort of really large disaster. We're seeing a lot of that move downstream. And so what we want to talk about with folks is, like we talk about the scene in Ghostbusters we love, is when they show up to the hotel, right? So it's like a business, right, going about its normal activity, is beginning to have an interruption to its clientele, to its potential revenue, right, with this ghost that has showed up, right? They're completely ill-prepared. They have no tools by which to understand what this threat is, whether it's big or small. So they call the only people that they know, which are like the people that created this cheesy commercial on TV called the Ghostbusters, to come out and help to thwart this threat or to identify it or do whatever. And they were complete, like both of the crime fighting team of the Ghostbusters, the ghost fighting team of the Ghostbusters, and this particular organization, this hotel, are completely ill prepared for what happened. It's like, and that's what makes the movie awesome, because it's freaking comical that they show up and like blast the maid, and then they like just, and then Bateman gets slimed, right? Because he doesn't know what to expect next, right? And then they wind up destroying this ballroom. And they go through this whole process by which they're like super surprised that they're able to like catch this ghost in this trap that they created using all these like tools, and they figure out these new processes where, they're not crossing streams and all these other things. And nobody was prepared for it. And at the end, after all the destruction that happened, they then rack up this huge bill that they give to the guy that's running the hotel. And he's like, I'm not going to pay that. And the Ghostbusters are like, cool. Well, then I'm just going to go put this ghost right back in your ballroom. Right. And that's such an interesting analogy for me personally, when I look at like what we do as an IT company, because a lot of the times, like, we are now prepared for these sorts of things, right? As an organization, but we're experts in this, right? We're vetted. We have tools. We show up. When you have a ghost in your systems, so to speak, like, it can cause a lot of damage. It can cause a lot of damage just removing it from the systems and locking things back down and tearing out whatever it did and locking down permissions and doing a lot of things that people were like, well, this is a huge disruption to my business. Like, I had somebody that was supposed to be in that ballroom doing a big banquet tonight. It's like, well, now you're not, right? Now you've lost that revenue, and you're going to have to replace all the crap that's in there. Oh, and this has been destroyed, and now you're going to have to do this and da. And people are like, that's ridiculous, right? Well, I get it, but it's $30,000 just to do a breach analysis for forensics. That's just how it works.
I'll give you another example. Not too long ago, there was a hafnium virus that was going around infecting mail servers. It was a 0-day infection that it just scanned whatever Exchange servers were out on the net. And if it had this vulnerability on a 0-day, which means it wasn't patched, it infected it. And there was no fix for it, right? You had to blow away your mail server and rebuild it from scratch. That is very damaging. That is very time consuming, right? So preventing that from happening obviously is going to be critical to not having downtime with your organization and not dealing with the damage that something like that might exist in your environment.
Yeah, I think asking the question to our clients, like, are you prepared for this? Or potential clients, are you prepared for this? Well, that entails multiple things that really ideally should be in place. There's end user training, right? That's preparing for it. There's having policies and procedures that support a security-based IT-wise environment, right? There's policies and procedures, there's training. Do you have the technical infrastructure in place to attend to something that happens to your environment, such as do you have backups, right? Do you have, what is your technical proficiency if something does happen? So there's multiple things that go into this discussion of, are you prepared for this? Well, I don't know. Well, do you have these things in place? Well, I don't think so. Okay. Well, let's talk about how do we get you there?
Yeah. And I mean, and there are some organizations that might potentially be more target rich, right? Like, they understand, that there's a potential that they could be, susceptible to a cyber attack or to be haunted by a ghost. Like, in this instance, the hotel had a 13th floor. Just saying, right? Like, they're like, we noticed some weird stuff going on the 13th floor. Like, yes, you did. Right. Which is weird, because I haven't noticed a lot of hotels actually don't have a 13th floor. It's kind of strange when that happens. Right. And so you've got to understand what your risk profile looks like, and then, adjust accordingly to it, because the last thing you need is, it comes out, right, where if you look at the hotel that they were at, right, the Ghostbusters show up, and, again, your IT department will probably be, or your IT consultants will probably be a little more discreet about when they show up, but they show up and now they're like walking around in these outfits, and they're freaking people out because they're walking around with nuclear accelerators on their backs, and and they destroy this room, and they come out and there's press there, and you have to understand as a business, like, you're going to freak out your customers, you're going to freak out your vendors, you're going to freak out your employees, right? When one of these risks happens, like, you can't 100% discreetly mitigate it once it happens, right? People are going to find out. And the questions are going to start being asked, right? When you start implementing new processes like immediately, and all of a sudden like the IT systems shut off for like a week, and then everything stops, and then all of a sudden everybody's taking like online training, people are going to be like, wait, the Ghostbusters shut up. What just happened? Did we get slimed? like what happened here? And I think it's important that if you put these processes in place proactively prior to a breach, you're going to mitigate your damage. You're going to isolate it to a particular place, hopefully be able to recover from it quickly, and explain to everybody when it happens, like, we were prepared for this, maybe not this specific thing, but something similar to it. And we were able to get through it pretty quickly. And it's because of these processes and systems that we built, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Imagine a situation. There's two competing things that could happen. Number one, you have training in place. You have a response plan. If something does happen, you have trained IT technical staff, right? Something comes in, it causes damage. The end user raises their hand, says, I think something's weird. I'm going to report this because that's part of our policy and procedure. The IT team receives the report, says, yep, we have a way that we are going to cut off access to the internet. We're going to, fence around this issue. We're going to attend to it versus, so that's really the advantage of having these things in place. Yes, the ghost scanner thingamajig with the pop out ears.
I don't remember the name of it. You remember the name, Andrew?
We looked it up yesterday. Freaking frack, I forgot it. But it's like, it's
detects ghosts, right?
Yeah, it's so one of the things that Patrick is Dan's done it quite a bit too, but Patrick's really been focused on kind of the idea around our NIST framework and CMMC kill chain, and like processes and tools used to mitigate risk when it comes to security, right? So, Patrick, like, there are some tools out there. There are some systems that have been developed at the enterprise level that have kind of moved downstream.
Definitely. Yeah. So PKE meter was the.
There you go.
So really, when you're looking out for activity, it's a multi-pronged effort, right? Not only do your users need to be hyper aware of being careful and looking out for the paranormal activity, but you definitely need to have tools and technology in place that is also monitoring your environment, right? The technology is always changing. It's always getting better because, frankly, the threats are always changing, right? And so having next gen security tools and tools that are continuing to improve to monitor and detect this type of stuff in your environment is critical to putting a stop at it, right? So if we bring the analogy back to your hotel, we want to make the environment inhospitable to these ghosts that they don't want to be there, or they don't even get there, right? So if you have these tools in place, if you have software and technology and security tools that are always scanning and preventing this stuff from happening, it's going to make your quote hotel inhospitable so that the ghosts move on to the next person, right? If the next person has weaker tools and weaker security, they're easier to haunt. You don't want that in your hotel. You don't want that in your business. You want to have the tools and the technology and the people aware of what's going on, that it prevents these sort of threats and these hauntings from happening in your business.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing you just said is someone's going to want to attack the easiest target. It's going to be the easiest to attack, right? The softest target. Well, oftentimes what we see is small to mid-sized companies are the softest target, the easiest to attack. They don't have this huge IT budget to buy all this, what we used to call next gen IT infrastructure of log scanning and all these other things, right? A small to mid-sized business may not have that infrastructure in place, which makes them an easier target, which I talk to business owners and I say, this is why you're an easier target. You don't have a $2 million a year, IT budget just for security. One thing that Patrick said that I want to talk about, and something Andrew and I have seen a lot recently, is 5 years ago, we called all these new technologies next gen that did all this really cool stuff that AV doesn't need databases to work. It learns on behavior. And there's all these cool things that have been coming out over the last few years. Well, for IronEdge, that stuff's current gen. That's stuff that we're working with right now. It's not next gen for us, So what you need to look at as there's all these more mature technologies to attend to viruses and attend to issues and to secure your environment. Well, what are y'all doing? Don't consider it sometime in the future. That's technology that should be in place now. And that's stuff that we're working with our clients to deploy.
Yeah. The thing that I think is important to remember is you need to start teaching. And we talked about this a little bit earlier when it comes to being proactive and creating the right tools. The best way to defend yourself is to inform your staff that certain things might be amiss, as Dan had mentioned earlier, right? Like if you look at, in the movie, you got this slimy ghost that's kind of moving around in the hotel. If maybe you've never seen him before, or like at the beginning in the library, right, where you've got the library ghost, there's book stacking, right? Classic paranormal activity. Then you come across like the which for a lot of people that watch this webinar, they're not going to know what a Dewey Decimal Card Index looks like. But in the movie, they have these drawers they slide out where they have the card index, and it's got slime all over it. Yeah. And they're like, oh, look, this, and he's like, here's your mucus, right? Like there's things that you find, right, when there are ghosts around. And if you don't know what you're looking for, it may just seem like something benign, or something goofy happened, or as Dan said, my screen flickered, or I got this weird email from the boss, but I didn't think anything of it. Like those are the kinds of things that if you begin to educate folks are going to be like, I think there's a ghost in that room. Like, let's go look at that. Let's go figure out if this is like a thing. And then, at that point, you call an expert, because then they're going to show up with the PKE meter and they're like, yeah, no, we checked the logs. There's definitely something going on in there. Like we need to be on top of that. Right. And we're going to handle it effectively and quickly. And sometimes, depending on the breach, like you may not necessarily go in and just catch the ghost. You might let the ghost do something. Right. I've heard of larger organizations where the FBI was like, yeah, let them, we're watching them now. They don't know we're watching them. Let them fish around in there. Right. You're not going to know. Right. Unless you're prepared. Right. Unless you understand kind of what your procedure is in the event that you find out that something's going on and you're working with some experts, you have expertise on your team, where you're checking with your cybersecurity insurance policy carrier and be like, what is our procedure for this? Checking with your attorneys, checking with your IT staff, right? Having these processes in place. I know you're a 30-person company. That seems hard. Yeah, it is. But this is kind of like, we're at that point in the movie where Walter Peck shows up and he shuts down the containment unit and all the ghosts get out. That's basically the pandemic. That just happened. All the ghosts got out in 2020 and now they're everywhere and they're haunting indiscriminately. Like Dan had said, like, you don't have to be the hotel. You could be the hot dog stand guy. Yeah. Right. And then Slimer shows up and eats your hot dogs and you're like, I'm just a hot dog stand guy. Like there's no ghosts going to get me. Well, guess what? Ghosts are now out and about and they're everywhere. And you get to the point where, people don't really understand, what the next big threat is. They don't understand what's coming. And then, we need to look at what that is, right? Is it state actors, right? Is it China? Is it Russia? Right? Is it whatever? I think when we talk about what the next big ghost is, there's a lot on the horizon as technology changes, right? And it's really going to depend on each person's business and the way that they're kind of set up, right? So as an example, if you're doing business with a potential with a company or a system that might be in a more state-controlled country, right? There may be a potential that if you're manufacturing something for them, that your next big ghost is going to be that state-controlled government sanctioning somebody to hack your systems in order to steal your intellectual property, because they would rather have it state-controlled and sell it to somebody that is manufacturing those parts or systems within their own country than to pay a country in the United States to do that work, right, at a premium.
Yeah, one thing we've seen in the last 6 months, last year, the next big ghost over, there's been all these ghosts released, so all the ghosts are going around crazy. But one of the big ones that we've seen is people leveraging one-to-many tools that companies use, such as SolarWinds, a very common tool for IT, internal IT to use. But people are attacking those tools to gain access from one system into many systems, right? That was the next big ghost for a while, right? So we're seeing this, and one fundamental shift we've all seen in the last 2 years is a huge amount of people now work from home or work remotely, right? That changes a threat landscape to where me sitting here at home, I have an ISP provided firewall, and that's it. I don't know how secure it is. I have no idea anything about it. That's a much different target for somebody than somebody's IT corporate infrastructure, right? So now you've got all these workstations basically out in the wild that are softer targets, and that shift in IT work and business work has changed over the last 2 years, right?
And you're also seeing an influx of, finally, the federal government, is beginning to take a more authoritative position. Whereas before, everybody, like, the reason Ghostbusters is funny is because the EPA guy shows up and he thinks he's just, he's doing the right thing, right? But he doesn't understand the ramifications of what he's actually doing because he's the government, right? I think the government over the last few years has finally gone, oh shit, like we need to actually understand what this risk is, right? And so Patrick's seeing a lot of that being pushed down into government contract space, right?
So it's not just government, right? So the government in general has put out a lot of guidelines for the commercial industry because everyone is a target now, right? It's like to the beginning of the discussion, at the top of the discussion, we said, a lot of people said that I wasn't a target. I'm not a target for these threats. And it's become so widespread that the government has put out recommendations on some of the basic stuff you need to be doing as a private company, a private industry. And going back to, what's the next big threat? If we were talking about what's the previous threats would be like viruses that were sent via email. And that's easy to detect because they're signature based. But really what you're seeing nowadays is somebody that gets into your environment and just sits around and watches stuff. Maybe they go in there and start making permission changes or moving files around, this sort of behavioral stuff that's not going to trip up an antivirus protection. It's behavior based that, maybe this computer is talking to a couple servers or some other applications that it's not typically or is not common that it should be doing that. These sort of activities or these behavioral activities that are abnormal is what you need to be looking for, not only from a personnel standpoint, but from a technology toolset standpoint. And that's where the next generation or the new type of technology is built to do, is to look at this abnormal behavior and block it, right? It's like, if this is doing something that, if word's going out and it's trying to, move files around on a server, and that's not something that, Microsoft Word should be doing, there's software in place that would prevent that activity from happening, right? And that would then send up the flag that says, hey guys, you gotta have a problem, or you have something in your environment that you need to look at.
And to that point, right? And one of the things that I think is amazing that we talked about yesterday, so we're going to bridge from the original Ghostbusters into the very first scene of Ghostbusters Part 2, right? Which is where the Ghostbusters basically have been relegated to a joke. Nobody thinks that there's ghosts anymore, right? Nobody's looking for ghosts. They have to go to make money. They have to go to kids' birthday parties and stuff. And I think they wanted He-Man to show up at the party or something, right?
The Ghostbusters.
Yeah, they're like, this is stupid. What did he say? Your dad says you're what? He was like, my dad says you suck or something, right? But here's the thing, right? And what I really like is that if the Ghostbusters had shifted their model from reactively showing up to bust ghosts, right, to creating proactive tools that you could put in and around your facilities, and then they would come out and do ghost checkups on stuff, they would be super wealthy, because everybody would be like, yeah, I don't want a Marshmallow Man or Slimer or spooky library lady like up in my business, my house, whatever. And they wouldn't have to worry about all this stuff. And they would have honestly found the funky hate slime in the sewer way sooner if that had happened. And they would have been actively protecting people instead of like showing up to rock a kid's birthday party. Right. And so I think that it's really important that people understand that whether it's an internal IT department, right, or it's an organization like IronEdge Group or whoever it is, that you're working with your technology team to implement these tripwires, to implement these pieces of software that are far more affordable than they used to be, coupled with, as Patrick was talking about, like people looking at the logs on top of things, right? There are security operations center, SOCs, that exist out there that are fairly affordable for people to integrate into these solutions so that you have smart people on top of artificial intelligence and machine learning type algorithms that run in the background to see what potential paranormal activity might be happening in your environment. And then at least raising a flag, go, hey, that looks like it might be something weird. It could just be the book fell off the shelf, but it could be that, something knocked it over and we don't know what that is. So we should go check that out. And I find that it's incredibly frustrating at times whenever something happens that we're called in and we clean up a mess. And it's happened from time to time where we'll clean up like a breach. And we're like, okay, so in order to prevent this sort of thing from happening moving forward, the recommendation, these things go in place. And they're like, no, we can't afford that. Like that just cost you $30,000 just to clean that up. And it disrupted your business for the last 3 weeks. And they're like, it's a risk we're willing to take. Okay. Right. Like I think that it's, I think it's important that people really consider it.
I'll add that in cyber insurance carriers are not going to do that anymore. They're going to say, look, if you're going to try to use our insurance to help protect your environment, you need to do a lot more. And what we're seeing in the past couple of years is the insurance companies are getting a lot more restrictive on what you should be doing to your protect your environment, because they've stopped just paying out ransomware, like that sort of thing. They're losing so much money that they're coming back and they're starting to say you need to do a lot more to get this coverage.
I heard anecdotally that there was a person that was part of a board of review for a community bank. They were on the loans committee, and there was a company asking for not a sizable loan, but a substantial loan. I think it was in the line of maybe $1 million or something, in order to grow out part of their business. And one of the people on the board was like, has anybody done a cyber check on them to know that whether or not they'd be in a position to repay this loan in the event that there was a breach? And it was like this light bulb went off for everybody on the board. And they were like, wow, we need to start considering that as part of this due diligence process, right? Because if you take money from a bank or a credit union or whatever it is to grow your business, and then you're breached and then you go out of business, you can't repay that loan. Like this is now part of the standard operating procedure for risk analysis and actuarial due diligence when people are assessing risk when it comes to doing business with companies. Even with us, not just being a technology company, but if we work with other more mature organizations, they want to do a risk assessment on us to find out if we could be a potential risk to them in just interfacing with them on a business to business basis. Yep.
I've seen that recently.
A lot of contracts require it these days.
Yeah. Not only that, people that you do business with, I saw it yesterday. Somebody that does business with us not only wanted to understand our policies and procedures and how we dealt with things and what technologies we have in place, but also another step removed, the tools that we use and the companies that we use to support us. So it's this never ending path where you have to figure out are the companies that directly support you and help you and work with you, are they using appropriate IT, cyber technology? Are their vendors using appropriate IT cyber technology? It's very, very interesting to see what's happened in the last couple of years.
I guess the short of it is you can't expect to just go in there, bust some ghosts and leave and not have it occur again, right? You need to continue. It's an iterative and programmatic approach of just maintaining security and always improving. That's right. Otherwise, you're going to get haunted again, and you're going to cause a lot of damage in your environment because it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yep. And I think it's important too that organizations understand the inherent risk in fighting off these, this ransomware stuff, when it comes, there's a lot of tools available to you, whether that's whether it's, financial, where you have like a good insurance policy, right? Whether it's proactive in the tools that you use to detect these risks and to mitigate them, whether it's backups, whether it's all these things, you don't want to get to the point where you're running around the entire city, like fighting off all these individual threats, but not fully realizing that everything's culminating at the end to this, the Gozer Zool monster that comes out, and you're fighting a marshmallow man. And then you got to do the ultimate thing, which is like cross the streams and like potentially risks destroying everything in, your natural universe in order to hopefully come out at the end unscathed, right? Like that's just, it's a dramatic way of putting it, but we see this so many times where people running unpatched systems and aged hardware, and they're racking up all of this, we call it technology debt, right? And then these vulnerabilities are inherent all the way through, and you're running around fighting all these fires instead of really getting an idea, if you look at the whole landscape, of what you should be doing. And then at the end, you literally have to shut down your entire electronic infrastructure in order to support your company and your clients, in order to continue to not get breached or to lose any additional revenues or goodwill with your clients. And you're back to running your company on paper from the 1980s, right? And so what we want to do is just make sure that everybody understands, like, these risks exist. They exist from 25 people companies all the way up to 25,000 people companies and larger. We want to make sure that people understand that this exists, and hopefully create some sort of an analogy that allows you guys to explain to your stakeholders and to your employees, hey, like, we don't want to be caught, with a ghost in the system. We need to be proactive about it, right? So, Dan, was there anything else you wanted to touch on? Anything that we missed?
No, just the high points that I talk to my clients about is the size of your organization does not correlate to your likelihood to be attacked, right? That's probably the most common thing that I talked about today. And I want people to take that away from this. So if you can take that away and you understand any size organization, any maturity of organization certainly has the ability to be attacked, and, believing that those ghosts exist, that would be my takeaway today.
Patrick, what do you say?
I work in different verticals and across different industries. It's a threat across every industry for sure. Certain industries are a bigger target, especially if you're holding financial data or health information. Certainly retail has credit card information. Anything that somebody can get a hold of and make money off of is a bigger threat. And so for those industries, certainly you need to be hyper aware and vigilant about protecting your environment. But beyond that, every company has something that's important to them, and that's their data. And so what you see from a broad stroke is you'll go in there and they'll encrypt your company data because they know it's valuable to you. It may not be valuable to somebody else, but if they come in there and they put a lock around your data, you can't do business. And so they hold that for ransom, and that's a way that they make money, because it's all for them. It's all about making money.
That's fair. All right. So the $10,000 question, Dan.
Yes.
If you were one of the Ghostbusters, which one would you be?
Egon.
Really?
Spangler?
Yeah.
Really? All right. What about you, Patrick?
I'm trying to remember their names. It's been years since I watched them. So it's Vateman, Spangler, Stance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be Dan Aykroyd.
See, it's weird. So I see Dan as more of Ray. Like, he's more Ray because he's kind of like good natured and like somewhat like not wholesome, but also wholesome. Like he's like he kind of gets things, and he's just like, I can't believe that you guys
check, please. No.
But then I see Patrick as more as like Egon, but he's kind of like dry and hard to understand, and he collects, like, he has weird hobbies. You're like, wait, you do what?
Yeah.
He's like, I have a drone.
I changed my answer. That is actually pretty astute. Do you go, okay, well, last thing for me today. Do you see the Slimer in the picture behind you?
Oh, he's way back there.
Yeah. Between
there's a Slimer in here. Yeah. There you go.
Oh yeah, no, and that's totally true. I think that I just saw a note that I think we needed to talk about real quick. Like if we were all in a situation where we were like, clear your mind of all thoughts or something terrible would happen, Dan would totally be like, sorry guys. Like I totally thought about the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, right?
That is me. Yeah. Yeah, that totally is me. I couldn't help it. He seems so sweet and innocent.
Yeah. and I would be the asshole on the roof. I'd be like Venkman. I'd be like, well, we got this guy all wrong, right? Like, he's just a sailor. He's in town for a good time, right? Come on, guys. Let's look at this a different way. Oh.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, cool. Well, I really enjoyed this. We look forward to seeing everybody again soon on our next webisode. And y'all take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you all.
Bye.